Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Writing Lounge. Today, we're going to be working on tips to build better teams, particularly at work. And I'm going to introduce you to Gretchen Rubin's work on the four tendencies, and we'll just think about ways that we can use that framework to help us work in our teams more effectively. So here we go. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Allison Freiberg, and I'm Professor of Communication and Cultural Studies at the University of Redlands School of Business and Society. Those are the courses I teach. You can read about them. And I also teach this Writing Lounge webinar series. We also run a bunch of study abroad programs, and I teach a lot of those, and we travel all around the world. I have this coming year, we're going to go to Spain and study sustainable business. And in my off time, you can usually find me in Italy running off the beaten path wine and food tours. So there's my contact info, and feel free to reach out any way you'd like. All right, let's get in here. Now, for those of you, I always come back, you've all worked in teams, and I always come back to this one joke that I heard many, many years ago. I'm sure many of you have heard it. And it's from the person who said, when I die, I want my pallbearers to be the members of my group, either at work or at school, my small group, my team, because quite frankly, I want them to be able to let me down one more time. Well, we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. And I just highlighted a couple of reasons here that tend to be trouble spots when working in teams. Now, people don't do the work needed. Some team members are kind of shut down. Some team members talk over others. Maybe expectations for the team are unclear. And there's all sorts of other reasons as well. They're just team trouble spots. It's the reason we all kind of roll our eyes when we're put into teams and go, oh, gosh, okay. Well, let's try to reduce the size of despair and see what we can do, okay? Now, what I am going to do is show you this brief short. It's a 4-minute video, and it's animated, but it's from a larger lecture of Gretchen Rubin, who does a lot of sociological and journalism work. And she wrote a book about what she calls the four tendencies. And this is an argument about how we tend to fall into one of four categories in how we respond to inner and outer expectations. So the expectations we design for ourselves and the expectations that others have of us or our organizations have of us. And so why don't I just go ahead and play this, and then we're gonna talk about it. Of course, we have to get through the commercial. There's no skip option.
There are outer expectations like a work deadline or a request from a friend. And then there are inner expectations like our own desire to keep a New Year's resolution, our own desire to get back into practicing guitar. So depending on how you respond to expectations, you're an upholder, a questioner, an obliger, or a rebel. Upholders readily meet outer and inner expectations. They keep the work deadline, they keep the New Year's resolution without much fuss. Questioners question all expectations. They'll do it if they think it makes sense. Next, obligers. Obligers readily meet outer expectations, but they struggle to meet inner expectations. And then finally, rebels. Rebels resist all expectations, outer and inner alike. They want to do what they want to do in their own way, in their own time. So what do you do with this information? How can it help you manage yourself better, and how can it help you deal better with other people? Each of the tendencies has many mottos, and my favorite motto for upholder is, discipline is my freedom. And there's a lot of great things about being upholders. They're self-reliant, they're self-starters, they're very good at executing, they want to meet expectations. But as with all the tendencies, the upsides are also the downsides. And upholders can be rigid. So you want to make sure if you're an upholder or you're dealing with an upholder that they're not turning into like the mindless bureaucrat of doing their own paperwork endlessly. Next, questioners. And the motto for the questioners is, if you convince me why. then I'll comply. They're always looking how to make processes better. They tend to love information. They're really great for all of us because they're the ones who are saying, like, why are we doing this by Friday? Why are we doing this report? Why are we listening to you? Why are we doing this at all? But the upsides are the downsides. Questioners sometimes drain and overwhelm others with their constant questioning. So what do you do if you're a questioner or you're dealing with a questioner who's stuck in analysis paralysis? One is to use deadlines. Another is limits. You can interview 5 people for this job position, but we're not going to interview 15 people. Or you find trusted authority. If you want to buy a new great bicycle, you could spend the rest of your life trying to figure out what is the best bicycle. Or you could just go to a really, really great bike shop and think, people who work here really know a lot about bikes. I can be very guided by their judgment. So next, obligers. So obligers are the rock of the world. They are the type O. They are the type that pairs up the most easily with the other tendencies. Really, the frustration of being an obliger falls most on obligers themselves, which is reflected in their motto, which is, you can count on me, and I'm counting on you to count on me. What's the cure for this? If you want to meet an inner expectation, you must create systems of outer accountability around that inner expectation. You want to read more? Join a book group. Now, finally, rebels. Their motto is, you can't make me, and neither can I. It can be challenging to be working or living with somebody who, every time you ask or tell them to do something, is very likely to resist. So how do you help a rebel or help yourself as a rebel? So let's say you have a rebel colleague who is refusing to go to a mandatory Wednesday morning meeting. You could say to the rebel something like, I don't know if you know that we have these Wednesday 10 a.m. meetings. It's like everybody who's at the meeting, we think about all the projects that are coming up in the next several weeks, and then everybody in the meeting, we take the interesting ones. And then we leave the dregs for the people who aren't at the meeting. So yeah, the meeting's at 10 a.m. on Wednesdays. Information, consequences, choice. It's up to you. So I really do think that this can help you show compassion for yourself, because there's nothing wrong with you. You're not lazy. You don't lack willpower. It's totally predictable that something that's easy for someone else might be challenging for you. There's plenty of ways to work around that. And it can also allow us to show more compassion to other people. Because when we understand other people, then it's not a matter of one person's right and one person's wrong. It's just how do we both, or all of us, get where we want to go.
All right. So that's a 4-minute animated version of a much longer lecture and, of course, her book. So I invite you to actually look at the longer lecture. You just have to look up Gretchen Rubin on YouTube and correlate that with the 4 tendencies, and you'll get a number of options. Or you can always go out and check out the book. But let's go over what she was talking about, okay? That there are 4 tendencies for people in workplace teams. And she went over them very quickly. We're going to go over them a little more slowly to get a better sense of them. But the first thing we need to remember is that these are tendencies for how people meet or don't meet inner and outer expectations. And she identifies 4 of them. And she's honestly really looking at organizational situations. You can also extend it to academic situations and even interpersonal ones as well. Okay, so we have the upholder, the obliger, the questioner, and the rebel. You're probably already getting some sense of, I wonder if I'm an obliger. I wonder if I'm a questioner. Well, let's see. First up is the upholder. Now, this is the person who tends to meet both inner and outer expectations. So if they create an expectation within themselves, they're going to meet it. If something is given them from outside, a paper is due, a work project is due, a report needs to be completed, they're going to meet those expectations, inner and outer. They're self-motivated. They tend to thrive without guidance. They get projects and tasks done. Upholders don't need reminders. They meet deadlines. So every time you're giving them a reminder, you're not helping them. Okay, they are driven to meet their own inner expectations and any expectations that come from external sources. They're often seen as leaders. You can kind of see why, right? But the downside is that they can sometimes appear rigid, cold, they're self-reliant to a fault almost, and even selfish at times. Nothing's going to get in the way of meeting an expectation for an upholder, whether it's an expectation that they've created or whether it's an expectation that they've gathered from the outside. So nothing's going to get in the way. So if you're the friend or a colleague of an upholder, they can be kind of difficult sometimes because they're never going to be very flexible. Their motto, as Rubin describes it, discipline is my friend. Okay, so we can see both upsides and downsides of this. Are you an upholder? Do you know upholders? Okay, how about the questioner? We all know questioners. Some of us are questioners, and they tend to question all expectations, whether they're inner or outer. I do want to take a pause here just for a second to contextualize a little bit. Rubin is not trying to say that this is who you are and there's no other way to be, and there's only these four categories and that's the way it is. In other words, it's not a conversation ender. It's a conversation starter. And you can kind of think of, okay, I'm having trouble in my team here. How can I use this framework to help me understand why the people in my team are behaving the way they are, why I'm behaving the way I am? Okay. All right, questioners. They're going to question inner expectations, outer expectations. They're just going to question, question, question. We know these people. Some of us might be these people. They want reasons and justifications to understand the purpose behind what's being asked of them or their team. They're not trying to be jerks. They're trying to find their path forward, and to launch onto that path forward, they need their questions answered. It has to make sense to them. They're asking to have the process and purpose clarified. As you can see, this is Gretchen Rubin uses this phrase here, paralysis by analysis. If you're always, always, always questioning, it's hard to make progress, right? So how do you help a questioner, or what do you do if you are a questioner? She says that you need to set deadlines or limits. I think her example is we can interview 5 people, or you can go to like 10 stores or something like, but you have to set deadlines and limits, or she uses the bicycle store example, or you take the guidance of a trusted authority. Ultimately, you need to have an external limit set. And that's how you say, okay, ask all the questions you want, but at 1:30, we need to move on to the next thing on the agenda. Okay. And that will help the questioner both get what they need, but also set a limit. Obviously, questioners can be seen as stubborn or obstructive, overwhelming, draining, because they're always asking questions. You just want to get this thing done. But I think you'll also note, if you've been in a team with a questioner, that very often they bring much needed analysis to the table. They help you figure out why. Their motto is, if you convince me why, then I'll comply. Again, not in a very sort of path towards progress kind of way. They're just trying to understand how to move forward. Okay, are you a questioner? All right, the obliger. This is probably the most common person we see in corporate situations and in work situations. It's the obliger. They tend to meet outer expectations, but have trouble meeting inner expectations. So if that report is due, they're going to make sure that report is due, even though they may have to sacrifice some of their own expectations. An example I use is, that report is due. The team is going to go meet at Panera for lunch. Meanwhile, the person on this team has set up an expectation, a goal that week or that month of bringing in their lunch every day. And the obliger here, so that's an inner expectation. Rather than spending money on lunch, they're going to bring lunch every day. Well, the obliger is going to say, well, the report has to get due, so that's the outer expectation. So fine, I'll just go to Panera. I'll get something there. I'll just make this exception. So what gets sacrificed is the inner expectation. Now, there's always a workaround that she could bring their, um, they could bring their lunch to Panera. But the idea is that the obliger will sacrifice their own inner expectations so that they can meet the outer expectation that they've inherited. Obligers require external deadlines and need other people to hold them accountable to tasks, projects, and goals. So if you're an obliger and someone gives you a task or a project, you are going to get it done. So what's the best way for, in Gretchen Rubin's argument, to help obligers meet inner expectations? That would be to externalize them, create external systems of accountability. What's her example? Your inner expectation is you want to read 30 books this year. Well, if you just leave it to yourself, obliger, you're never going to be able to do that because some outer expectations always going to get in the way of it, and your book goal is going to be sacrificed. So what do? You create an external option for accountability. Join a book club. Maybe there's apps that count your reading, stuff like that, that will give you some sort of external expectation. And since obligers are so great at meeting external expectations, this really helps the obliger meet their inner expectation. They just externalize it. Okay. Now, imagine if you're an obliger, and I imagine many of you are, because most of us are. Many of us are. Obligers can sometimes rebel. You're always sacrificing your own goals for the goals of what's outside. Always. Again and again and again. Well, that resentment's going to build up, and then you're going to rebel. Right? I don't care. Right? So obligers can sometimes rebel because they tend to neglect their own inner expectations, and those expectations don't go away. They just fester, and then you explode. An obliger's motto that can help them: you can count on me, and I'm counting on you, the external, to count on me. Because if they can externalize that internal expectation, everything's going to be good. Because they're obligers. They're going to meet all external expectations. Any obligers? All right, our final category, the rebel. They tend to resist meeting both inner and outer expectations. You just can't tell a rebel what to do. A rebel can't tell a rebel what to do. Okay, they do not respond well to the imposition of expectations from external sources, and they're not good at establishing and meeting their own inner expectations, and don't remind them. What's the example that Rubin uses in the little video? The one about the Wednesday meeting. And that's where she introduces the framework. The best way to deal with a rebel is to give them the information, let them know the consequences, and then let them choose. Hey, we have a meeting. We have these meetings on Wednesday morning where we talk about all the great projects, and the people who are there get to choose all the great projects and leave the lousy ones for the people who aren't at the meeting. Information. So if you're not at the meeting, you're probably going to get the lousy projects for the week. Consequences. All right, see you later. Meeting's at 10. Bye. Let them choose. Nagging them isn't going to work. Reminding them isn't going to work. Information, consequences, choice might be a good strategy to work with the rebel. Their motto: you can't make me, and neither can I. Okay, there we go. We have the 4 tendencies. We have upholders. Those are the ones who meet inner and outer expectations. We have the questioner, who questions all expectations. We have the obliger, who's really good at meeting external expectations, but pretty lousy, always sacrificing their own inner expectations and goals. And then the rebel, who can't meet inner or outer expectations because they're always rebelling. And in each case, Rubin gives us a strategy to work with people who have these tendencies, who tend to move in the world this way. Again, these aren't Procrustean identities. These are just tendencies, how we tend to move in the world. Okay? So I'm curious, and I don't know, send me an email and tell me who you are. Which tendency aligns most with you, and why does that matter? And then here's an invitation for you. Think of a situation in which you worked as a team. What tendencies were present in the team members? How do you know? How did you figure this out? Or even if you're thinking of it now, how can you tell if someone's an upholder or a questioner or an obliger or a rebel? Did problems occur from their tendencies or your tendencies? Now that you understand Rubin's framework, how do you think you could have managed the team issues differently? If a team had a really successful project, can you attribute some of that to how you managed each other's tendencies? If it was a disaster, can you now think about this framework to help you understand the conflicts that emerged? And also, maybe there's a fifth little bubble here. Maybe there's another tendency that you can think of. This is a conversation starter to help you understand and deal with the different personalities on your teams, including your own. So with that, it's a little bit of a different kind of writing lounge this week, but this is ultimately a communication issue. And I hope to see you in future writing lounges. Let me know if you watch this. Okay, bye-bye.